help. I am requesting immediate help to the state of Mythic Plus. So, welcome everyone, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon as well. Today is Thursday, we are on our second day in EU of this Season 2, and I guess second and a half, third day of the Season 2 for NA, and I wanted to point out something that has been, picking the attention of quite a few players. Because while the raid seemed to be quite chill, quite nice, evenly balanced, nothing right now at least, just looking at heroic being absurdly overtuned or some mechanics being way too unfair, the raid went quite smoothly. However, what didn't really go nearly as smoothly was the state of some of these Mythic Plus bosses. Of course, made even worse by the fact that this week is tyrannical, so these problems become highlighted even more. We are in a situation at the moment where half of the dungeons are fine. They might have other issues, like for example they are way too long, or perhaps the trash is a bit too long, but in and of itself the dungeon is okay. We are talking for example about old fan favorites like Freehold. Freehold is just fine as a dungeon. It got a few updates, especially the last boss, and how it works is still fine. Also Underrot. Underrot has received the least amount of changes, and Underrot is also still fine as a dungeon. I don't see that many people complaining about this dungeon right now or in the future. So that's also a well done and well updated dungeon. We also have something like Alderman. Yes, Alderman is long. Yes, it has lots of bosses for a tyrannical week, but most of these bosses have seemed fair. They have seemed quite even. Perhaps the last boss might be an issue with the space throughout the fight of the pools on the ground, but that requires a bit more coordination with your party. The rest of the boss, as well as the rest of the dungeon, seemed quite fair. Same goes for Halls of Infusion. Perhaps I'm only saying this because it's not fortified and we only got to see the bosses themselves. All of the bosses were more or less fine, not really out of tune. The only one that might be out of tune is Khajiit, the Unyielding, the Frost boss, the one where you have to hide behind the ice boulders. The biggest issue in that fight is the constantly ticking damage that the party is taking, which is, also somewhat easily tunable because you can just lower the number and you're good, you're done. So these 4 dungeons have seemed quite fair at the start of this season. However, the dungeons in the pool are 8, not 4. So we have 4 dungeons which are kind of an issue right now. The first issue is Neltharus. So Neltharus is the dungeon that has the most number of bosses right there on the edge of being broken, right there on the edge of being OP. And I fear that as we go higher in keys, all these sleeper OPs will become more visible to the rest of the player base. Many of these bosses have certain mechanics which are likely going to be way too deadly at high keys, like the explosion AoE of Magma Tusk. The magma eruption, big damage and big dot might be very, very dangerous later on. Even Chargath with his grounding spears and fiery focus combo, where you do a whole bunch of damage to the party. Right now it's somewhat manageable. It might become a nightmare later on, but for the moment the biggest issue is the last boss, is Warlord Sarga, and the way the whole mechanics around the magma shield works. The shield pops up, you have to pick up the treasures, throw whatever action button you have, whatever ability you gained to try to do damage to the shield and break it. The issue right now is that the treasures all do different things. Some of them are instacast, some of them are instacast but ground targeted and you have to target the boss. Others are casted but you can move, others are cast but you cannot move. Other treasures even charge you to the boss. So the issue is that if you want to do it perfectly, you have a window where the boss is casting the shield and nothing is on the ground. So you want to pre-cast your treasure and then the shield pops up, your treasure lands on the boss and you almost break the shield instantly. The problem is that with all of these different things the treasures can do, it might be an issue for you to guess the right timing, to do it properly at the right time, which turns it into an issue because right as the shield pops up, the ground will start to be filled with fire, which swirls on the ground, which will one-shot you if you stand in them, which makes it very, very confusing and complicated to properly use your treasure effectively. Yes, by now or by tomorrow, probably there is going to be a weak aura instantly telling you in big caps what you're supposed to be doing based on the treasures you have picked up. But still, it would be nice if Blizzard themselves fixed the mechanics, the tuning around this display around the last boss of Neltharus. And this is the least bad of the last 4 dungeons we have to talk about. Neltharus, as I said, it has the most number of bosses likely to become broken, likely to become OP as the keys become higher in level, but for now the biggest issue is the way the last boss works, with the treasures and the magma shield. Where we see bigger pressing matters are number 1 in Vortex Pinnacle. Vortex Pinnacle has the last couple of bosses, the Drake boss and Assad, the last boss, which seem to be a little bit too high in numbers. Altyrus has the problem of the dot ticking damage, just like the third boss in Halls of Infusion. He has Cold Front, which keeps ticking on the party, and then if you are not facing the correct way for the winds, you're also taking the downwind dot ticking damage, so you're basically taking double dot in this fight. You also have more movement because you have to start playing around the downburst, so you have to go on the wind to get knocked up. This also makes it harder for the healer to keep healing, for example, so it loses even more time. You also have to reposition often because you have to stay in the right direction for the winds, but you also have to reposition because it's going to be doing the breath targeted at one of the players. So you have to lose a lot of time moving around while there is tons of heavy ticking damage in the party, which at the moment makes it a very challenging fight for healers in this new season. Same goes, although this one will also be more challenging for the DPS, for Azad. The biggest issue of the last boss is the AD. The AD, the Skyfall Nova that spawns and permacasts the AoE damage. This AD has way too much HP. It takes way too long for the DPS to bring it down, to the point where it only takes 5 seconds or 10 seconds before the next AD spawns. So you're in this constant cycle of trying to take down the AD, which has too much HP and in return does way too much consistent AoE damage for the rest of the party to heal through. That is perhaps the biggest problem, the biggest issue in Vortex Pinnacle. The last couple of bosses in sheer terms of numbers, not mechanics, not the way the fight works, but just in how much damage basically is required to either push through the boss or how much healing is required to survive through the boss. This problem becomes even worse in what is perhaps the worst designed boss at the moment, which is the last boss of Brackenhide Hollow, the Catriarch Rathai. He is obviously an abomination because the entire fight revolves around Withering Rot, which is a dot damage on you, which on top of that, if that wasn't enough, also reduces your damage done by 5%. On top of that, he spawns the Rot Burst Totem, which has a 5-second cast time, which, if not stopped by killing the totem, is gonna apply 1 stack of the dot to all of the members of the party, making you do 5% less damage, making it even harder for you to kill the next totem that spawns in time. If that's not bad enough, you also have the K-Strike, the tank buster that the boss does. This tank buster actually has base numbers even higher than the Jade Serpent kick of the third boss of Temple of the Jade Serpent. That is the only dangerous thing in that entire encounter. The only one. And in here, it's like the third worst. The third problem of this fight. You get a Temple of the Jade Serpent third boss level of tank buster, while you also have ticking damage to the rest of the party, while you also have add prio to take down the totem very, very often. And while all of this is happening, you're also running around trying to avoid the choking rot cloud that is chasing you around. So the numbers, the sheer numbers in this boss are way, way too overtuned. The totem spawns too often, the totem has too much HP, the cast time of the totem is too short, the dot damage of Withering Rot is too high, the decay strike tank buster damage is too high. So Tons of things are going wrong with this boss right now, to the point where I am surprised we are now on Thursday, 1.5, 2 days after the season, and still not seeing a hotfix to nerf this boss. My similar surprise continues to the last and the worst of the dungeons at the moment, which is Neltharion's Lair. So the first couple of bosses go down mostly okay. Where you find the issues are in Naraxas and Dargru. So Naraxas has only one problem really. Naraxas' problem is called Toxic Wretch. So he is going to spit poison dot ticking damage to the entire party on, I think, a 12 second window permanently. This is way too high of a damage window. Considering you are effectively dying without defensives from full HP on a 16, imagine doing this on a 24. The item level is not gonna save you. It's just way too high damage. And not just that, it's not that this happens once in the fight, right? The big instance of damage you have to survive. No, this happens every 12 seconds, every 15 seconds, for like 3 minutes. You can't survive this. So this boss is clearly an issue with just this one ability, which needs to be tuned down. Nothing much else to say. It's just the sheer amount of damage that this AoE, this party-wide dot, is currently doing. The last boss is a similar problem, but I am assuming not many players know about how much of a problem this boss is, because it requires you to have beaten Naraxas before you actually get to Dargru. And considering how difficult Naraxas is, not many players actually got to fight Dargru. The problem of Dargru is the AoE damage, similar to Naraxas, because when the boss moves, he does a bunch of AoE damage. Fine, keep the boss still. However, he's also going to be spawning an ad, and the ad is going to fixate to a player and chase him, and the only way to make him stop moving is if you make him run through the walls that have been created in the fight. So what happens if the ad spawns some 15 yards away from the wall? Well, he's gonna have to walk for 15 yards, and that's a lot of AoE damage you have to heal through. You also have the magma pool that spawns on the ground when the boss does his magma wave ability, where you have to go and hide. Then the magma pool is going to be spawning, a whole bunch more of AoE damage is going to be happening, and then the new ad is going to spawn, so he's going to pile the AoE damage on top of the AoE damage that's already happening. And at the moment this seems very high. Even at 15 or 16 key levels, the AoE damage, the sheer amount of healing you have to go through to survive this, is way too overtuned at the moment. That is what I found overall the most surprising in this first day and a half or so of the patch. The fact that the dungeons, compared to how smoothly tuned, at the very least at the moment, the raid was, the dungeons seem to be a little bit more out of whack. You have 4, half or so of the dungeons, Freehold, Underrot, Uldaman, even Halls of Infusion, somewhat okay, but then you have the other 4. The last boss of Brackenhide Hollow, the last boss of Neltharus, the couple of bosses at the end of Vortex, Pinnacle and Neltharion's Lair, currently having in general way too high numbers in terms of the damage they do, of the damage that needs to be healed. I wasn't even expecting to be making this video, because I thought that by the time I wake up on Thursday I will read Blizzard's hotfix to the dungeons and read a whole list of nerfs. So, problem solved, but apparently now it's Thursday afternoon and we still don't have any hotfixes fixing the overtuning of these bosses, so I guess we can go ahead with making the video and complaining about the state of these bosses. Hoping that this video will bring luck and Blizzard will get to fix these bosses somewhat soon. We can stop for today on this Thursday, because I have to go back and wipe on these overtuned bosses. So we are thanking for today, of course, as usual, all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel. You can, as usual, still support the channel completely for free. Liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel, will do the job. What will also do the job, you can support me by following me over on my Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch. With these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and In the meantime, well, the video has now been edited and still no hotfixes for these dungeons.